Welcome, everyone. Hello. Let's give it a couple of minutes so everyone is joining and we'll start. Okay, let's get it started. Good afternoon, everyone. Please welcome to our MCR 2030 Nature-Based Solutions webinar in partnership with ICLEI Europe and several other organizations. I'm Elena Monteiro. I'm the responsible for the Making Cities Resilient 2030 Secretariat in Europe and Central Asia region, and we're very pleased to have you all connected. Today, we will discuss the cutting-edge practices in nature-based solutions to build urban resilience and tackle climate change. We hope this will be a very interactive event. It is divided in 2 sections with space for questions and answers. Please make sure that you engage in the chat. Tell us where you're connecting from. My colleague Yoli from ICLEI will be supporting us with some polls and questions to trigger your engagement today as well. So stay tuned on the chat box as we will be sharing the links to the resources mentioned also on this event. This session is recorded. The video will be soon available on our website and YouTube channel so that you can share with your colleagues and friends who couldn't connect today. Well, now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Andrew Bauer, team leader for risk governance at the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction in Europe and Central Asia, for his welcome remarks. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Helena. I hope you can hear me well. I'd like to welcome on behalf of the regional office everyone to this webinar and thank our partners ICLEI Europe for organizing this session as part of the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative. The MCR 2030 is a global network focusing on city resilience, and we are here as part of the co-lead entities managing its regional implementation in the Europe and Central Asia region, and are delighted to join our partners and co-chair of the coordinating committee of MCR 2030 Europe and Central Asia, ICLEI Europe and Vasilis. Very glad to join you here. This coalition of partners is really exemplified by this collaboration at the heart of this webinar, and we are delighted to make it happen as part of a discussion on a very important topic, which is nature-based solutions, a critical issue in the urban resilience agenda, a critical issue in the context of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, the global process driving the DRR and resilience agenda with UN member states and all stakeholders at a local level. Cities are at the forefront of disasters. Their engagement is critical. They are also the source of a multitude of very innovative practices, including in the area of nature-based solutions. And we're delighted to have some very, very interesting examples coming out of today's webinar, and also this being very much the start of a journey, the start of a conversation where we can continue collaborating, exchanging, sharing experiences in this sector. So without further ado, again, thank you very much, Helena, for steering this and coordinating today's coordinated conversation. I'd like to pass over back to you and invite Vasilis to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Like we said, this is an initiative. This is a webinar that was designed and promoted in association with different organizations. But most importantly, one of Making Cities Resilient 2030 core partners, ICLEI, who is also, like Andrew mentioned, the co-chair of our coordinating committee in the region. So it is my pleasure to invite Vasilis Latinos from ICLEI Europe to also give his welcome notes.
Thank you, Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Andrew. Dear colleagues, participants, I'm very happy to be participating in this webinar today. This is Vasilis Latinos from ICLEI Europe. We are still, most of us, in our home office, despite the flashy backgrounds, with the effects of COVID-19, of course, still rather immense, and many cities and regions in Europe experiencing also like devastating hazardous events in the last couple of years, from extreme flooding events to wildfires, heat waves, and hopefully this winter will not be hard on us in the cities that we work with. This ongoing crisis has been a call for us at ICLEI Europe to do more, to scale up our efforts, to reduce disasters and improve resilience governance. Over the past decade, the Making Cities Resilient campaign saw more than 4,300 cities and local governments joining the campaign in an effort to build awareness and responding to the need for better risk reduction and also resilience efforts at the local level. Despite this huge number of cities, there are still many cities in the world that are still out there, and we still want to engage with them. And we do know that we need to do more, we need to do it faster, and we need to engage with more cities in the implementation of risk disaster reduction measures. This is the reason also why ICLEI partnered with UNDRR and other international organizations to move from advocacy about disaster risk reduction and resilience to action. For us, ICLEI Europe, this partnership with UNDRR being the co-chair of the initiative is rather important. Since 30 years, we work closely and directly with cities and communities, and we want to even stress more the importance of their work in implementing local sustainability and resilience. And of course, we all know, and that's the most important thing, that these cities need support. By joining Making Cities Resilient 2030, they have access to the resources and support offered by all these organizations participating in the initiative and many other partners at local and regional level. Last week in Matosinhos in Portugal, during the European Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction, we announced 4 resilience hubs, which are the cities of Barcelona, Greater Manchester, Helsingborg, and Milan. And these cities have been recognized for their policy and advocacy work in addressing growing climate and disaster risks. But we expect more cities to join the initiative, to apply to become resilience hubs, and to work with us and the partners in the MCR 2030 in a variety of topics, also including blue and green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. But I will stop here and leave the floor to our amazing speakers to share more on the topic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vasilis. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining. We're ready to start right away with our main purpose here. But first, I'd like to get your ideas, your suggestions, your comments on how your city is using nature-based solutions to strengthen resilience. I'm so glad to see people from all over the world joining. We will share some experiences from Europe and Central Asia, but it's amazing to see all the cities and people connected today. So please engage with us. I'd like to now invite Daniela Rizzi, ICLEI Senior Officer for Nature-Based Solution, Green Infrastructures and Biodiversity, to present the main topic of our event today. We will then follow with Bettina Wilk, also Senior Office for Nature-Based Solutions and Biodiversity at ICLEI, who will show us one of the main tools developed by some of our partners to collect and share these nature-based solution cases. Please, Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena. I'll share my presentation. I see, and the poll is on. Should I wait a little bit for the result or just share a screen? Yeah, there. Can you see? Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Daniela from ICLEI Europe, as Elena presented me, and I would like to talk a bit about nature-based solutions and how these are related to resilience. So I always like to start a presentation with the definition of the European Commission. We work with this definition a lot, because we're working with a lot EU-funded projects. And I will not read this definition to you, but 2 points that I would like to raise here is that nature-based solutions help to build resilience. That's part of the definition. And also that it is important to ensure biodiversity, and it should benefit biodiversity. It delivers also a range of ecosystem services. You know that this initiative is about building a global partnership to strengthen local resilience. We know that risk should not be departmentalized, so it is not to make it a responsibility of just one public service provider or one responder. You know that resilience is about, you know, having some kind of repetitions and integration of solutions. So here, I think nature-based solutions can offer a lot due to their multifunctional character. And of course, it's about cities investing in resilience building, and not only on, you know, reducing risk. And it's about allowing systems and services and people to respond to crisis, cope with shocks and stresses, and rebound. So what does this has to do with nature-based solutions? This is a graphic from Eggemont. And she actually divides nature-based solutions in 3 types. And we can see this as a very simple scheme to understand that type 1 is the one that is more related to protected ecosystems, you know, natural protected areas like Natura 2000, for example, in the European context. So the ecosystems that are not really touched by man. Type 2 is more of a hybrid type of ecosystem where you have man-made interventions and of course also natural functioning processes. And type 3 is more related to these new ecosystems. So you can imagine a green roof on top of a roof where you only had gray before. So, you know, bringing new ecosystems where the nature was already taken away. So it's about rebuilding and adding new ecosystems. I like to also show this graphic to illustrate a bit. This is not an abstract concept, it's very, very on the ground and hands-on. And you can see here that it spans throughout many different scales. So you can see here a bioswale in a parking lot, for example, which is a pretty, let's say, local intervention. And then you can have really corridors spanning throughout regions. You can have urban forests, like very big scales, for hectares and hectares. So we cover a lot of scales with NBS. And the co-benefits of NBS are quite important for the concept of resilience. So you can see here a lot of concepts that are speaking to resilience, for example, coastal resilience, climate resilience, but then of course also urban regeneration, so the resilience of governance systems, and so on. I like to show also this slide because I guess it punctuates a bit the understanding of NBS. This is an umbrella term, right? So many other terms that already existed before this was coined are also embraced by the concept. And it's about protecting and increasing biological diversity, promoting resilient ecosystems. It's about multifunctionality. So we think about how we can address challenges of social nature, economic nature, and environmental nature as well. The co-benefits are here again, and it's about rehabilitating degraded ecosystems. And of course, we always have to consider the natural and the cultural context of each place when we're planning and delivering NBS, valuing traditional knowledge, valuing scientific knowledge, promoting collaborative governance. NBS has contributed a lot to breaking silos. So this also has to do a lot with the concept of resilience and contributing to a fairer and more equitable society. This is the wedding cake. You probably saw this image before from the Stockholm Resilience Center. And I like how the Nature-Based Solutions Initiative shows here a still from a video in which you can see how nature-based solutions should actually contribute to all 17 SDGs. So I see some publications that say the NBS agenda contributes to SDG 11, SDG 7, SDG, you know, they say one here and one there. But ideally, the way we in ICLEI are approaching this is that we really think how we can highlight, you know, and activate all the SDGs. And here, I don't want to do a lot of policy talk here and make it a dry presentation, but I think it's very important to point out the importance of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We're now in the first draft, and nature-based solutions didn't make it to the first draft, actually, and it's still being discussed in COP15 next year. This is going to be really published, so discussions are ongoing. But in any case, the ecosystem-based approach is mentioned there, and it's still being discussed if NBS will make it to the GBF. The Sendai framework is also, I want to mention here, 3 of the 4 priorities. They directly or indirectly support NBS implementation. They foster a wider uptake of NBS, and they link them to policies and land regulations. We are partners of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and here I want to highlight how NBS can really help to restore degraded ecosystems. So we have been, you know, encouraging the cities in our network to really align their work to the UN Decade. The EU Green Deal, going a little bit more from a global perspective to a more European perspective, we have here the Biodiversity 2030 strategy, the Farm to Fork, and actually a lot of these policy areas, they speak to NBS in one way or the other. And here you can see in the slide from the European Environment Agency how these different sectors are embracing the NBS term. So forest strategy, water directive, floods directive, the common agricultural policy, and the strategy on adaptation, and so on. Here I wanted to highlight this strategy has been published this year, and NBS is mentioned to generate gains to adaptation, mitigation, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity and health, but also being particularly important for climate resilience. And of course, we said this has been recognized as being able to help to tackle the dual crisis, right, of biodiversity loss and climate change. So the EU has been recognizing the relevance of NBS, investing actually, this number has grown since this graphic was done, is more like 300 million euros. And you can see here cities around the world, not only in Europe, implementing NBS, you know, and in the form of pilots or even in the form of research actions to make the knowledge base for NBS more and more mature. And here I like to show how we have in ICLEI been supporting local governments in different areas. So globally, there's the Cities with Nature initiatives, there's the Urban by Nature program for NBS capacity building, the Cities Biodiversity Summit, which will happen back to COP15, will also highlight nature-based solutions. The Edinburgh Declaration, which is a commitment to enhance urban biodiversity. And in Europe, we also have a lot of initiatives. And I just want to highlight here that you see NetworkNature's resource pages. My colleague Bettina will speak after me and show to you cities here how you can make use of the resources that are coming out of the H2020 projects. And of course, we encourage you to subscribe and unite with us and promote city-to-city exchange in our many events that we promote. Here, just showing again a slide with the Urban by Nature program, NetworkNature, and the Green City Accord. So these are some of the initiatives we have been offering to cities to rise their NBS agenda. Here are some of the H2020 funded projects we're working with. Some of the projects are here present. You're going to hear about Clever Cities from Martin and Anna, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Regreen very shortly. So we have put up these fact sheets, and we try to do a very, how do you say, concrete example from cities and initiatives around the world, highlighting these different topics that you see here in the screen. So we highlighted a good example of how biodiversity can be increased by NVS, collaborative governance, health and well-being, education, and NVS, how you can bring NVS into schoolrooms and help children to think, nature-based thinking, also water quality improvement via nature-based solutions, flood mitigation, noise mitigation, heat mitigation, air quality improvement, business activation, and also as urban design elements. I'm going to show here 3 from the cases. One case is from Vienna. This is the biotope city, and this is a very interesting example because it's probably one of the first nature-based solutions districts around the world, where you have really large-scale green roofs, green facades, artificial wetlands, water ponds, and etc. And they used the software here to make sure that the orientation of the buildings and the shading and the wind circulation in this district works in an optimized manner. So you do have like wind staying only 2 to 3 minutes within the open areas, and NBS is helping to really cool down and address the heat island effect in this neighborhood, and of course reducing air temperature and helping with human comfort here. There is this example from Turin. It has as a starting point doctors inquiring like how patients with mental health and physical illnesses can help to protect biodiversity. So they engaged in a project of counting butterflies and actually even also planting and plant species and helping pollinator areas in the city of Turin. And this will be really upscaled throughout many cities in Italy that are really interested in raising their what they call butterfly oasis. And this has also a very strong relation to school children. So these patients have also been working a lot in schools to raise the interest for pollinators and biodiversity. And in this case, I saw you have people from Almada here, so hi to you. And I love this case to my heart. They used nature-based solutions for coastal resilience. And it's a case where you can see how they restored the natural capacity of the sand dune beach. And so it's really, it has responded really well to Storm Emma in 2018. And they made a really interesting thing that the whole scheme has a lot of signs. Communication for the population was really important in this project. So people can read, about the processes happening there and why nature-based solutions were used to provide flood resilience in this case. And they have been monitoring geomorphological evolution. They have been monitoring the biodiversity colonization of throughout time, vegetation survival, and how the sediments are the behavior of the sediments throughout time. So this is a very interesting example. And I just finished my presentation here, just calling the attention for the OPLA platform. So for cities here who would like to see other NBS cases, there is this platform with cases, also this other platform, which was part of Naturvation. And now that the Naturvation project is concluded, this is the Unicity platform. You can see 1,000 cases of nature-based solutions in this platform. And also for cities, I think it's very important to know where to get nature-based solutions in terms of services and in terms of products. So the Connecting Nature Enterprise platform tries to do this marriage between suppliers and buyers of nature-based solutions. So that's it. Thank you very much. Last slide. I just want to make a point that resilience of NBS depends on biodiversity. So biodiversity is probably at the heart of NBS. Without it, we don't have a resilient nature-based solutions. But also, of course, it depends on effective engagement of stakeholders. And NBS is about providing opportunities to create, strengthen, and reinforce a focus on complexity. And of course, you hear that from the resilience scene. It's about the interactions of socio-ecological systems. And of course, we think that by providing a delivery of ecosystem services, we can increase the resilience and decrease vulnerability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. Outstanding presentation. With your permission, we would like to share this presentation with all attendees. We'll upload it on our website as well. As we see the wide array of people joining the call and cities in different stages of the resilience building process, what I see from your presentation is that nature-based solutions can be either like something even more tactical and preliminary in terms of like protecting already existing ecosystems, but it can also grow to incorporating technologies and different stakeholders in the city to build resilience. So what it shows is that any city can work with nature-based solutions regardless of their capacity or like their degree of planning within the city. So thank you very much. You mentioned many resources, many projects, many initiatives, both in Europe, but also global. I'd like now to invite Bettina to see how we can get ourselves organized in this multi-stakeholder environment. Can you tell us a little bit about NetworkNature? What is it, and how can we make use of it?
For sure, thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm the coordinator of NetworkNature. I'm also working for ICLEI Europe, same as Daniela. And yeah, I'll try to bring you a bit closer about what we're doing there. So basically, it's a Horizon 2020 project, but it's actually much more than that, because it's on the one hand a platform, and on the other hand also a stakeholder exchange mechanism, I would say. So in terms of a platform, we're trying to collect and synthesize what we call the NBS evidence base. So all the relevant knowledge, services, tools, and resources in one place, and that is at networknature.eu. And you're kindly invited to visit the website to explore a bit further. But we are also an umbrella project to represent the different Horizon 2020 projects that are actually working on nature-based solutions. Daniela has already given a glimpse. Up to date, it's more than 30 of these projects. And our main objective is to consolidate and support them, basically by helping them showcase the results and outcomes of their projects, and by making it visible also to other target audiences and a broader audience. But on the other hand, we also want to expand this community of practice. So it's not only about staying in this ivory tower, it's also really bringing out the knowledge that we have, creating awareness with other target audiences, and expanding this community. We have 4 main target audiences that we want to engage. Those are landowners and natural resource managers, also the finance and investment sector, infrastructure designers and planners, including urban and spatial planners, but also the wider public. So quite some work to do, as you can see. The ultimate goal is obviously to mainstream nature-based solutions and to upscale their adoption and use across science, policy, business, and practice. We do that through capacity building, but also through collating and also through producing guidance documents for policymakers, for practitioners, and also for businesses. And we also offer dialogue events where there is exchange opportunities and networking opportunities between and among the different groups and stakeholders. And obviously, one of the key objectives is also to raise awareness. So basically raise awareness with those that are not yet so engaged in the dialogue, get them into the dialogue and get them spread the word about nature-based solutions. And here a strong focus is actually on the young generation as the important future messengers. Daniela has shown that before. This is what we call the NVS Horizon 2020 project portfolio. You can see here, and actually a few projects came in the meantime, so it is growing. But what is important and what I want you to see here is that these projects work on different issue areas. So we started off with the first projects of nativation and nature for cities, working on governance, business and finance models, then followed by projects focusing strongly on climate and water resilience. That might be very interesting for you as well. And I'll show you a few results of these projects later on. Then moving on to urban regeneration that Clever Cities and also Martin, who is part of the panel today, represents. And then lately a very strong focus on ecosystem restoration, rehabilitation, exchange with Latin America and China, as well as large-scale NBS. So beyond these projects, the consortium partners also collaborate with the other projects on so-called transversal themes. These are actually themes that they all are interested in and that they all work on as part of the calls that they have responded to. Currently, we have 5 of such NBS cluster task forces, how we call them. And they work on data and knowledge sharing. That is task force number 1. So basically, how can we make sure that we can actually share data? How can we create APIs so that it's possible to share data across platforms? What are the GDPR issues we have to overcome? The second one is working on integrated assessment frameworks, meaning how can we actually monitor the impacts of NBS? Can we make sure that they actually deliver on what they promise across environment, economic and societal impact, governance, business and finance models that underpin the creation and co-creation of nature-based solutions, also very, very important. NBS communicators, that's task force number 4, that works on how can we actually have a joint messaging about NBS to society and to different actors. Also, how can we tailor messages? And the last one, task force 6, is working on co-creation and co-governance. So basically, how can we make sure that different stakeholders and citizens are engaged at a very early stage, ideally already in the design, but also across the life cycle of nature-based solutions, also in implementation and monitoring. So now you might wonder, what is NetworkNature? What can it do for you? So what the platform basically offers is a variety of features, and I have tried to spotlight a few here that are of relevance to you. One of them, as Daniela also already mentioned, is the case studies section. So we have been growing case studies across the different issue areas and challenge areas that NBS address. And these case studies of NetworkNature are actually embedded in the OPLA case studies as well. So you would have all the case studies from OPLA also on the NetworkNature platform. But we are also constantly investing resources to expand these and to get more case studies. Here, for example, for the search term resilience, 26 of them pop up, and you can explore them a bit more in detail as you want to. We also have an events calendar. And if you register as a member, you actually have access to full functionality of the platform. That means you can submit your own case study. You can also submit an event of your choosing, if you have one, if you want greater visibility and impact. And most importantly, there is a very, very large and growing NBS resources section as well. And here a few examples of what that includes. It's really varied resources that you can find there, from slides that give you ideas about the societal, environmental, economic impacts of particular NBS, to guidance documents such as the one here on urban greening plans that we have issued lately, and on to more specific technical guidance on how to implement nature-based solutions, as this catalog of nature-based solutions that you see here on the lower left, that looks at climate adaptation, climate mitigation potential of NBS, specifically in cities, or a publication like the one on the right, which is an EC Commission publication that gathers the results and insights from all Horizon 2020 projects on their work on flood mitigation and coastal resilience, including what their policy impact is. I've put here, and I'm happy to share the slides afterwards, I've put here the different links, so you can just click on them to then check them out later at your own pace. Another important resource that I would like to briefly introduce you to is the Nature for Cities platform. This is very useful since it's the only platform really that gathers methods, tools that you can use across the different, across the life cycle of NVS basically. So it looks from the design and planning to implementation and also monitoring of nature-based solutions. And that is very useful because it offers a collection of different tools depending on your needs. It is targeted at policymakers as well as urban planners or any kind of professionals that are involved in offering services around design, implementation, and monitoring of NBS. And just to give you a brief glimpse here, so the first stage is basically the design stage, so it can help you orient a bit. For example, if you have a challenge that you want to meet in terms of climate resilience, for example, it would then give you a particular NBS that would actually suit that challenge and would align with that challenge. And it also has fact sheets for all of these. It also gives an overview of different case studies that have been done in relation to that particular NBS and helps you diagnose your city as well. So where can you potentially locate an NBS at all? Is there space? Where would there be space? And what would be suited to do? Then the next stage is the assessments, very important, like the monitoring and assessment of impacts. It offers you a variety of tools here as well, and different methods that you can also download to assess the impacts. And then the implementation here, it also has 3 different elements here, and especially like the one in the middle, because it's very useful. It's basically a combination of a tool that combines governance models, business and finance models. So you start with inserting a certain type of nature-based solution. You would then indicate the degree of stakeholder engagement that you would like. So is it that someone would help you co-implement it? Or would they have more like a passive role, for instance, or do you want to empower citizens with it? And then it indicates which finance and business model would go with that particular requirements that you have inserted. And it also gives you certain case studies of how this was done in cities. So that's a very useful resource. Then another one that is more focused on finance of nature-based solution, that is coming from the NIAD project, which was one of the early projects focusing on climate and water resilience and insurance schemes. They have created quite a remarkable handbook, actually, and this handbook is dedicated to a financing framework for water security. So what does it really mean? When we look at NBS finance, we have that issue that the majority is financed by public funds or by public funding. So we gradually want to change that, obviously, also to open up to co-finance and blended finance mechanisms. But the problem is often that there is no immediate or no clear return on investment from NBS, either because it's not monetized, the co-benefits, or because there is just not a proven value added to it. So in this handbook, actually, that tackles exactly that issue with regards to water-related infrastructure. So it looks a bit across scales of NBS, and it tries to stack the different NBS to a conglomerate, you could say, so that you can stack the multiple benefits and also revenue streams coming out of it. All of that is basically performance-based contracts that this handbook is looking at, and it's also giving concrete instructions about which kind of implementation arrangements you can have in terms of governance, finance, but also contracting choices you can make. And basically then it helps you develop a business case for investable nature-based solutions that combine public and private resources. You can download this handbook here. I've got a few more slides in the end that I'm happy to then provide you with as well if you need more information. And finally, this is also a very good resource, possibly also very useful for you. It's a handbook on indicators that has been created as part of this task force 2 that I mentioned before. It was a collaboration of 17 EU-funded projects, and it went over several years actually, and the product is really good. It's a very, very comprehensive handbook, you can say. I think it has over 400 pages, but it basically it looks at the different issue areas and challenges related to nature-based solutions. It's 12 actually, as you can see on the right here. And for each of these challenges, it identifies indicators for assessing the impacts of nature-based solutions. And this is basically to help you orient yourself. It can be for practitioners, it can be for city representatives, so to develop a monitoring and an evaluation framework for nature-based solutions. It is also accompanied by an appendix of methods that is very useful. That is basically each of the indicators is described in a fact sheet and lets you know how you can actually calculate it, also what the advantages and drawbacks might be. And as you see here on the right, several of these challenge areas are actually related to resilience in different ways. And just to show you here briefly how this is actually depicted in the report, and you can explore it yourself then later on. But basically, it is a mix of outcome-based indicators, structural indicators, and process indicators, as you can see here in the class indicated. There's always a recommended set of indicators, around 6 or so per challenge area. And it also gives you an idea of which type of NBS that Daniela introduced before it would align with. So it's a quite good resource that has also been tested in several case studies that I would recommend. And then last but not least, we also have obviously our own activities that we do in NetworkNature, similar to the Resilience Hub that you are establishing. We are trying to implement nature-based solutions hubs in EU member states. Why would we do that? We want to create long-lasting structures beyond NetworkNature's existence. So this version of NetworkNature, this project is running until 23 and will hopefully have a follow-up by us as well after that. But it's important that we create structures that move this forward, move NBS implementation and uptake forward, as well as mainstreaming. That we also have relationships built on the very local level, from local, regional to national level, and to inspire new partnerships for action. So what do we do until 2023? So mid-23, until the end of NetworkNature, we try to launch 6 NBS hubs. Basically, all of these hubs have stakeholders from different sectors, ideally, and across governance levels. So we want to connect, we have like a multi-level structure within these hubs. And also, obviously, the activities would follow the needs and requirements of each of these hubs. We have 2 different types. One is European regional hubs, so more in terms of European regions that have similar planning and landscape contexts. And there would be representatives from different EU member states across different levels collaborating in these hubs. And the other ones are more like national hubs. Sometimes these national hubs are also the starting point for a wider European regional hub that consists of stakeholder networks, again, across governance levels, across different sectors. But yeah, also as a possible starting point for a wider European regional hub in that sense, as mentioned before. What do we offer? NetworkNature offers to these hubs representatives and those that kick them off individualized support, so one-on-one support. We also have regular exchanges to launch these hubs, advice and communication and outreach campaigns. How can you actually engage stakeholders on the ground? How can you make expand the hub itself and also its followers almost, or its participants? We would help you promote the activities that you have ongoing in relation to NBS, any relevant policy developments and achievements in our annual event. That is a very important science policy practice interface, also with European policymakers. We also have biannual webinars where you can actually make use of the consortium's wider connections and network and get in touch with other local authorities, local governments to exchange on certain needs and priorities you might have. And we would also offer a dedicated profile on the platform where you can exchange with your own members, upload your own resources in your language that would then also find entry into the nature-based solutions resources. What we would expect is from such a hub to commit to organizing a launch event, also to, on their own account, actually foster networking across levels. So already have like a leadership and a good connections in that sense, provide peer-to-peer learning opportunities and events, so engagement opportunities in the country, and to basically regularly share insights, reports, case studies, or any relevant guidance as well, so that we can help them create better visibility, showcase them on NetworkNature, and also in the events that we actually represented. Obviously also involving the wider public, the general public in the actions, not making them detached from them, and participate in the NetworkNature events. And yeah, my colleague is actually in the audience here as well. So if there is interest from your side, if that speaks to you, please feel free to get in touch with her. That's Anna Brun, and we can give you more information how to become such a hub. And I hope I haven't went too much over time. Sorry.
Thank you,
Thank
Bettina,
you.
and thank you so much. It's so important what you mentioned about monitoring and making sure that you deliver this benefits and co-benefits. I think this is important for those on the ground to ensure that the narrative around investing in preserving and regenerating this ecosystem, which is a concept that we work a lot as well in urban resilience on and disaster risk reduction on how to foster, is the narrative that we foster, that prevention is an investment. I also want to invite everyone to follow the Prevention Saves Lives campaign by the UNDR that follows the same kind of concept. So we have a few questions now. We have some time for questions, and I will invite everyone to also join us in the Q&A, and please refer to who you want to respond to your questions. We will come back at the second moment of our webinar with more space for questions. We have one from Egidio on who is funding the project implemented by the NetworkNature. But I wanted Daniela or Bettina to. This is a EU-funded project for by the European Commission. But I would like you to also expand this question on like what are the other resources for funding that cities can access, if you know anything, both in Europe or outside of Europe as well.
I don't know, shall I start actually? So we are discussing, we are mostly in Horizon 2020 and then obviously future Horizon Europe projects. So I'm not fully aware of all the different funding mechanisms that cities can actually tap basically. But what we often talk about in terms of follow-up funding from Horizon projects is also Life and Interact. So that's basically a different format, and it's a longer term project time frame as well, but it's also connected to more funding actually than the Horizon Europe program, but it also needs some kind of co-investment. So it's not the same type of funding actually. I know that Life and Interact would require that. Not sure, Daniela, if you want to complement. I'm not sure if I'm the right one to answer these questions.
I know that a lot of the cities we have been working with, they have been getting money to do pilots, you know, via this H2020, and now it's called Horizon Europe, the new program, via these projects. But as Bettina said, there are other initiatives, but we mostly as ICLEI Europe, we know from European funded initiatives. So, but I know there are other ways. The World Bank has some programs, EBRD, right? Vasilis maybe can say some words, Anna as well from Belgrade, European Bank for Reconstruction and development. So there are other banks, the European Investment Bank as well with NCFF, that's the Natural Capital Finance Facility. So there are some initiatives, but they are loans, they're not like, because the H2020 is a grant. So you don't have to pay things back, right? You get that, and then you have to achieve outputs from the projects. But these other initiatives that I mentioned, these are more like Bettina said, loans, so you have to there's some kind of mirror funding required and a payback, right?
Excellent. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Bettina. On the handbook of NVS, there is a section on health and well-being. Do you know of any case studies which NVS have been focused to improve well-being in cities?
Shall I go? Daniela, you want to go first? You had the pollinator. Well, there's several actually. There's also projects that we have, Go Green Roots. That is a relatively new project that looks at the connection between nature-based solutions and health, both mental and physical health. We had a semester theme. In NetworkNature, we have so-called semester themes where we look at particular themes of interest to target audiences and to the projects. And our previous one actually focused on NVS and health. So I pointed towards that. I'm happy to put the resources and also the final report into the chat just in a bit. Yeah, feel free to also browse the case studies of NetworkNature. You can use different filters. You can type in health and well-being, and then it would actually give you all the different case studies. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a lot of other questions that we won't have time to answer all of them, but I prefer to just come back to these questions at the end of the event so that we can first hear from the city's experiences, and then we invite all of you again for more questions and answers. Is that okay? We at Making Cities Resilient 2030, we understand the value of peer learning and knowledge sharing. So today we will hear from cities who are pioneering NVS in Europe, and I'm sure you have a lot to learn from all of these ground experiences. We will have two, perhaps three, one of our speakers is having some trouble connecting, but let's hear from Hamburg and from Belgrade. To 8 minutes presentation, so I ask you to keep on time so that we have more time for discussion. Please make sure that you share your questions on the Q&A tab. Please make sure that you address to each speaker you want to hear from anyone in particular. So first I'd like to invite Martin Krekeler. He's a coordinator from the Clever Cities in the city of Hamburg to present the case of Hamburg. Martin, welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me first try to share my screen, whether this works. Should actually. So do you see my screen? Yeah. That's a good sign. Yes. Okay. So let's start. Yeah, my name is Martin Krekeler. I'm representing the city of Hamburg today. And actually, I'm the coordinator of one of those NVS projects that Daniela and Bettina have been talking about before. It's Clever Cities. But today, I will not talk about this whole project. I will just talk about one certain nature-based solutions, namely Green Roof, and about the Green Roof strategy that the city of Hamburg applies since a few years. So this is what you see here. The motto is on the roofs, get set green. That's the Hamburg green strategy. Hamburg, you might know that, second biggest city in Germany, 1.8 million inhabitants. So what you see here is already on the pictures, we are close to water. We are close to the sea, close to rivers. And this is, of course, leads us to the fact that we have to adapt to changing ways to handle this water abundance. So we have to handle heavy precipitation events, flooding, storm floodings. So this is the main focus when we talk about climate adaptation, about nature-based solutions in Hamburg. Talking about political commitment, the Hamburg Green Roof Strategy was applied in April 2014. So it's already a few years old, actually. And at the start, we had there was a monitoring for the whole city. And it was said that there were 80 hectares at that time of green roofs in the city. Not too much, actually. 80 hectares sounds a lot. But if you remember that Hamburg has approximately 70 square kilometers of roof space. That's not too much, actually. And the target at that time was, let's get 100 additional hectares of green roofs within 10 years. And so we could come closer to this aerial view, which is just an architectural rendering. So it's not a real situation at the moment, but we would like to have it like this. A lot of green roofs over the inner city of Hamburg. So why do we want to do that? It's about water retention, handling more water than we had before, especially in wintertime. It's about the urban heat island effect, controlling the climate, especially in summertime. Biodiversity is one of the major benefits we try to tap here, this potential. And of course, it's also about new green spaces in a densifying city. Why densifying? Because Hamburg is a growing city, limited amount of space. So this is, of course, leads to densification of the built city, of course, with at least 10,000 apartments that have to be built every year. So how do we, can we still stay a livable city? This is also a part of what we were thinking about when introducing the green roof strategy. So the strategy itself rests on 4 pillars. It's about promotion, where we can talk about the financial subsidies, but other incentives as well. For example, a reduced rainwater tax that you have to pay when you have a green roof. And it is, of course, about being a good example, namely building green roofs on public buildings, just as lighthouses, to show what works and what works not, perhaps also. It's also about dialogue. It's about investing in public relations, communicating the scheme. And there was, for example, a green roof competition in Hamburg, where the best green roof, the most biodiverse green roof, was awarded. We talk about, of course, this is part of the strategy, regulation. Good old land use planning and urban climate planning. So we have to bring green roofs as an aspect into zoning regulations, into policy programs of the city, of course. And we see here the 4th pillar, scientific support. So we need an ambitious measurement program to really, this was mentioned before already, I think by Bettina, to really guarantee the benefits and the co-benefits, to harvest those when implementing nature-based solutions, and in this case, green roofs. So these are a few figures. It's actually quite a small program, right? I mean, it was 3 million have been spent up to 2020. Now an additional program, a following program was set up with a similar amount. It applies to new and existing buildings, surely relying on voluntary measures of those who build those houses. The green roof has to be like larger than 20 square meter, and the layer which you bring on the roof of soil has to be 12 centimeter for new buildings. Mostly private owners, but a lot of commercial buildings are among those that get a green roof. A maximum funding for private owners was 50,000 euro. Commercial buildings can receive more. There was a big public awareness campaign, a lot of materials created around this, and these materials were not only aimed at the wider public, but also to local administration, to planners and local, well, let's say district decision makers, because, you know, Hamburg is like a federal state in Germany, and it's subdivided into several districts, boroughs, so to say. And so to inform also those working at the borough or the district level on what's going on with this strategy. Yeah, being a good example, there were another 75 million euro invested in public schools for green roofs, and this program was now enlarged to green facades as well, because we've seen that green facades are still one step further. It's like statically, it's like from I mean, architecturists can tell you more about this, but it's sometimes not so easy to apply a green facade on an existing building. Also in terms with the rest of the isolation of the building. So this is something which was now included into the program. So we try to be, as I said, a good example as a public administration for others, for private house owners and companies. We try to bring that into the Hamburg climate plan. So what we did was that the city has dedicated priority areas to, how they call it, city climate precaution areas. And so here you can make green roofs compulsory for new buildings. And also there is we try to use the German Nature Conservation Act by saying, okay, these green roofs can be measures for compensate your impact on nature, and this compensation is obligatory according to the German Nature Conservation Act. So we try to bring that into this this logic. Of course, if the city sells land, we can write into the tender, well, if you build something there, you have to have a green roof. Sometimes for bigger developments, we have urban development contracts where the city can try to negotiate green roofs into these contracts. And of course, we have zoning plans for new developments where we can say, yes, please apply some green on your roof when building in these areas. Of course, scientific support, not only regarding what is growing there really, but also about the lifestyle. I mean, an economic assessment of the life cycle costs, but also, of course, about biodiversity and the hydrologic performance of these roofs. And well, I have to add something here, because due to the project Clever Cities that I'm coordinating, we added something to that, which is more like a social monitoring, because we've seen it's so important to include the neighborhood, to include the residents in the parts of the city, that we really have to ask them, okay, what do you think about the new green roofs and green facades, especially when we talk about accessible green roofs, so roofs that you can walk on, that you can play on, and so on. So how do you benefit from that, or what would be measures related to green roofs that you would benefit most from? And we try to monitor this as well. It is a bit more of an effort because it's all, well, mostly qualitative surveys, so this takes some time, but this is really, really important to create acceptance for that and to create green roofs that benefit as many people as possible in the surroundings. So here we have some figures. There were, like, as I said in the beginning, 80 hectares of green roofs in 2014, 140 hectares in 2018. And right now, this figure, I have to verify, to be honest, I researched a little bit, but we are around 180 hectares right now. But if you compare this overall amount to the funding scheme, you will see only a minor part of that came into existence through the incentive itself. So up to now, 60.5 hectare have been subsidized with these 3 million that were available until last year, and another 3 million that will be available during the next year. So you see, we are not responsible for the major part of the new green roof through the financial incentives. And so what can we learn from that? We have to come to binding political decisions. So at first you need some political commitment to enable some long-term strategy. So you see, we started 2014 and it started really slowly, and then after a few years it began to accelerate. So it takes time. You need a strategic approach and a comprehensive concept, not only looking at green roofs, but of course binding this into the policy programs of the city. You need coordinated activities from several city departments. So, for example, we need here the Hamburg Ministry of Housing, as well as those as the Ministry of the Environment, and also the Ministry for School and Education, for example, when we talk about these lighthouse projects that have to well, should be an example for green roofing. So that means you have to involve a lot of stakeholders, private ones also, residents living in the area. And of course, we need the incentives, but you see, they are perhaps not responsible for the major part of the new green roofs, but they're very good for PR. So if we say, as a city, yes, we have this financial incentives, then people know, okay, that's a serious thing. So the city is interested. That's a good thing. And so we need that as a PR method. And there's another aspect to that, because through the financial regulations of that funding, we set a certain standard for green roofs. And this is also important if you want to develop or further develop your approaches. But you have to keep in mind, it takes time to establish those green roofs. What is difficult, or what has been difficult in Hamburg, is to get enough attention by political decision makers, which means that the main political priority right now in Hamburg, or during the last years, have been affordable housing. And so if you say, well, let's keep in mind the green roofs, then a lot of people will say, yeah, but it makes the housing perhaps even more expensive than it already is. So you have to really negotiate and argue for your aims, and you can NVS is a good concept in this way, actually, to argue for those co-benefits that come with NVS. So that might strengthen your argument. It turned out that it's, of course, much harder to upgrade existing buildings than new ones. You know, all those things that I mentioned before, the zoning plans, the regulatory remedies that you can apply, this is also only applicable to new developments. So you cannot really force someone, an owner of an existing building, to do that. So this development has been much slower than with new buildings. So these were some of the points that were a bit tricky for us. Yeah, that's all from my side. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have further questions. And this is a small reference again to the whole project, Clever Cities, one of the NVS projects in this whole bunch of projects that Bettina mentioned before. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Martin. This is an incredible presentation, an incredible case. And as urban planning planners, we're used to thinking of density as a good concept. And with COVID-19, we've been challenged to rethink of density in cities. And I think that I'm here thinking of the co-benefits of nature-based solutions and how the green spaces have an impact on the well-being of people, on creating spaces for people to gather in a safer way, or people to even to study, like you showed a beautiful picture of what looked like a class, like a classroom outside, and we should take advantage of these green spaces. We're now going to hear from Belgrade, Anna Mitic-Radulovic. Sorry, I hope I'm not. Please, the floor is yours. We have a lot of questions for Martin on the chat, and we're going to come back to those afterwards. The floor is yours, Anna.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Can you go in presenting mode?
Okay, just a second. I have a slight technical problem. Okay, now it's good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. As Martin explained, we are collaborating in Clever Cities project, one of the Horizon 2020 cluster. And I will briefly present on experiences of Belgrade. CEOS is a supporting partner. So Belgrade is the capital of Serbia with about 2 million inhabitants on the mouth of Sava and Danube rivers, but highly vulnerable to extreme weather events. So DRR is extremely important for us, with significant challenges regarding energy production and consumption, transportation, and air pollution. However, we have a good heritage of local community centers and community initiatives, which are again rising in the last couple of years. And they are highly sensitive to environmental challenges, and new collaborative models with public sector are being developed in recent years. Belgrade has a pretty good strategic framework, which was built upon the Green Regulation project. In 2015, after the floods, we developed the Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan. Then in 2019, the city of Belgrade adopted the Urban Plan of General Regulation of Green Areas. In 2020, the Assembly adopted the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, and it was even a SUMP Award finalist. And this June, the Assembly adopted Belgrade CCAP and GCAP, which have been developed within the EBRD Green Cities Framework, which was mentioned by Vasileos in the chat some minutes ago. So just to point out how much green infrastructure and green open spaces are perceived as important priorities in the climate adaptation plan. They are mentioned as first measures with high and very high priority. Then if we look into the content of the Green City Action Plan, we see urban planning and mobility and greening and resilience as two main sections. And if we go into the urban planning, this is now in Serbian, in Cyrillic, but the strategic priority is the improvement of green infrastructure. And one of the activities to achieve this objective is the Linear Park project. So we come to our area of work within the Clever Cities Horizon 2020 project. Martin presented on experiences of Hamburg as one of 3 frontrunner cities. Belgrade is one of 6 fellow cities focused on developing urban plan which will mainstream nature-based solutions. And we decided to work on the plan to develop a new green corridor in the former railway line, which is long 4.5 kilometers and establishes 15 new hectares of green areas. And our focus was on urban regeneration, but it is extremely important also for urban adaptation to climate change, because this is one of the points on the area of Linear Park, the Nebojša Tower of Belgrade Fortress. And this is the photo from 2016, when, due to floods, the transportation infrastructure as well as port facilities were completely flooded. And another point in 2019 was like this, when buses and cars were literally floating over the streets of Belgrade. So we adopted the co-creation approach and established Urban Innovation Partnership as one of the main tools of the Clever Cities project, aligned with the Urban Living Lab approach. So, of course, we worked with the government, with the city administration and the planning authority on development of this plan, but we also collaborated with academia, with private sector and developers around the Linear Park area, as well as with associations and citizens. And we tested the co-creation in the official procedure of urban planning development. On the left, you can see the procedure prescribed by the law, which recognize 2 moments when the plan intentions are actually introduced to expert and wider public. Those are early public hearing and public hearing. However, we established the Urban Innovation Partnership way before these official procedures. We organized questionnaire for citizens, we received almost 600 answers, organized several focus groups for different audience. Then we also prepared and were in a jury for the contest for young interdisciplinary teams, which gathered almost 30 teams, and 10 of them were selected to develop the conceptual design for the Linear Park. We discussed the plans with the wider citizenry much before the early public hearing. And then during the hearing, it was in the COVID time, so we organized online consultation and Zoom meetings. And all the inputs gathered, we systematized into official suggestions to the city government on 8 pages. Then in between those 2 hearings, we organized a series of discussions, events with experts, with students, with wider public. We organized the Nature of Cities Global Festival session. And when the public hearing was, we again organized discussions that joined wider and expert public, as well as open doors and windows exhibitions, and everything was evidence-based on an internet platform, Belgrade Urban Living Lab. We also collaborated with academia, with the Faculty of Architecture, and developed nature-based solutions catalog in Serbian language in collaboration with students, and presented it to the wider public. With NVS cards, which we used for nature-based solutions crowd mapping during various events. And in the COVID time, we shifted that crowd mapping into the online space by developing some Miro boards linked with the NVS catalog, which in the end was formed as an online publication, and it is available online. We also organized a lot of expert communications to define real concrete urban parameters which could support mainstreaming of NBS. And when the public hearing was, we conducted a very careful analysis of all the feedback, again with the public discussion for wider and expert citizenry. And the plan was finally adopted in August this year. And it really represents an innovation in the way of framing ecological services of green open spaces, in the way of treating ecosystem services, and in the framework of defining green parameters for the construction around the park area. But also in the methodological view, this is one of the materials of the urban plan, and it is much different and much more communicative than the regularly urban planning documentation that is being developed. We collaborated also with the NVS Horizon project and developed the Urban Living Lab. We registered it in annual network as the first urban living lab in the Western Balkans. And we managed to mainstream NVS and Urban Living Lab approach also in the National Action Plan for implementation of the Sustainable Urban Development Strategy until 2030. And our findings or recommendations would be to really encourage land use planning in favor of green infrastructure, which was the case within our park, transforming all transportation corridor into green, then promoting ecological index or green area factor or green city index or whatever tool to actually foster green urban parameters, to support and link with sustainable urban mobility planning and underline multiple benefits of NVS, which we already mentioned during the webinar, to explain and experience really the benefits of co-creation and shared governance in terms of sharing the power, but also sharing the responsibility, and to foster and support community actions. And I would just like to finish with one announcement. Clever Cities project is part of the Urban by Nature program, which already developed several regional hubs around the globe. And in May next year, we will establish the Southeastern Europe Urban by Nature hub in Belgrade. So if you would like to join this hub, yes, you can feel free to contact us after this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Excellent. What I take from your presentation is really the importance of participation, this extensive stakeholder engagement that might take a little bit more time to start the project, but once you get it going, you have ownership, you have commitment from the civil society, and this eventually will make people use and preserve that green space that is so important to the city. Thank you so much. We have like 10 minutes for question and answers. So I will ask all the speakers to be brief on their answers. I will start with Martin. Can you talk a little bit about more the governance of this project, like if there were any legal obstacles and on the other hand, help any legal obstacles, or on the other hand, helping the implementation of the green roofs strategies. And also maybe we can bundle up with another question for you. Hamburg has a heat plan for inhabitants, and how did you organize this plan? Thank you.
Okay, so first I have to say that actually I held this presentation on behalf of a colleague of mine from the Ministry of the Environment, which I'm not part of. So please bear with me, but I'm not able to answer all your questions. I start with the second question because I know that there is not a single urban heat island plan or urban heat plan in Hamburg, but it's part of the climate action plan. So the climate action plan of Hamburg has several sections, and one of it is dedicated to the urban heat island effect, which is it sounds a bit strange, but this is still quite new to Hamburg, because Hamburg, I mean, if you've been living here, you know that it's quite a rainy and misty city. So urban heat island was actually not one of the traditional problems of Hamburg, but it becomes one. During the last 3 years, we had like amazing summers for Hamburg conditions. So this becomes more and more pressing. Now it has been included into the climate action plan of the city, but no, we don't have like a single urban heat island plan. It's part of the climate action plan. So the second question was political barriers to or legislative barriers to the green roof strategy.
Governance and also legal obstacles.
Well, I mean, legal obstacles. What is the best thing actually to foster on a long term this green roof strategy is to bring it into the zoning regulations. And so I mean, as long as this is always of course a challenge, because once you bring something new into the zoning regulations, of course there will be people who doubt that and will probably sue you and say, well, that's too harsh an impact on my private property. But once this was decided, also by courts, by the way, this way was actually clear. So actually the quite comprehensive, in this case, German building regulations prepared quite a good ground to include also green roofs. But this applies really for new developments. I have to repeat that. So we have a much harder time to convince owners of existing buildings to upgrade theirs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Martin. Maybe a question to Daniela or Bettina. Do you have, as part of the work around NVS, the possibility to engage the private sector? How would you do that? How can you provide the local level support to design and implement solutions?
And maybe I don't really have like a ready answer for this, but there are some initiatives going on. So in my presentation, I mentioned this Connecting Nature enterprise platform that is, how to say, an initiative in that sense that tries to make sure that the enterprises that are interested in offering their services, that they can have a platform where they can feature what they can offer. And then this can be seen by cities who are implementing NBS, and then they can be contracted by the cities, for example. And I don't mean only the technical part of nature-based solutions. I think there is a huge, how do you say, sector that is related to social enterprises. And this is very, very often not seen as, how to say, getting enough attention, I think, but it is a very important part of nature-based solutions. So so we have been encouraging, for example, if you are a small enterprise and you're very good on doing co-creation, like I know that Anna is doing a lot of co-creation work in Belgrade. So cities that are implementing NBS, they need this kind of people to implement NBS, right? They need, how to say, these institutions who we call, they are like doing the bridge between the cities and the citizens, you know, and making sure that the processes are not top down, but they're also bottom up and involving the community. So it's very important, their services. And so the platform is one way. Other ways are, for sure, I think, is to, you know, to go after startup funding lines. So many countries have startup funding lines. So, you know, for innovation, and nature-based solutions in this sense can also apply, you know, for startup programs.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniela. Maybe a question for Anna. What are the 4 priority stages that has Clever Cities to plan to start for?
Thank you. I think that joint ideation and problems detection would be the first. Then second, probably prototyping, which we try to do within the young teams contest and conceptual design development. Then discussion and evaluation of that prototype, which we did during the public discussion, and then probably implementation, which was done through the adoption of the NBS urban plan. And maybe when you already invited me to answer, I can say that we managed to establish some collaboration with the private sector in this plan development. We targeted developers in the surrounding area, and one of the developer did fund the development of conceptual designs of the young teams. And we do plan to work on further instruments for using private capital in the park development and implementation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. This is a question for all of the speakers. Is there a type of experimental governance used or needed to implement NBS in cities? What, based on your experience, what would you suggest? How can cities organize to implement NBS? What's the formula?
May I start, perhaps?
Go ahead.
I don't think that there is a formula, to be honest, because the formula is this, that one size fits all does not work. And the formula is to include as many local stakeholders as possible, which is much easier said than done, of course. We know in Clever that we have tried in the project Clever Cities, you know, the overarching one that I'm representing as well here, and having, of course, Anna and Belgrade on board and many other cities. We have tried, all of those cities involved in Clever have tried to arrange specific governance arrangements and specific participatory arrangements also. For example, our partners in London, they've set up collective design committee where they paid people, where they paid local residents, which should represent the area, the pilot area, to be involved into the design of nature-based solutions. So they really put up like a citizen council with paid members, and which was a very promising approach. Actually, we tried new formats, theory of change workshops, where we try to imagine together with the people, okay, how should your area look like in the future, and what are the steps, the causal links that lead us to this state that we try to achieve. So these are really like local approaches, really adapted to local conditions and already existing local networks that might lead you further here.
Thank you, Martin. Anyone else would like to comment?
No, I think the key word here is co-creation. We always kind of preach that all the time. So co-creative approaches, that means there's a difference between co-creation and stakeholder engagement. And this is what we found is sometimes difficult to understand for citizens, but as well as for city people. Sorry to say like this, but Martin agrees. I know we have had this discussion many times as well. Stakeholder engagement is not co-creation. Co-creation means that you take someone by the hand and let them have a say in the beginning, ideally before you start implementing and along the different stages of a project as well. And I think this is where it's really getting tricky, actually. And this is where we really have to think governance in a new way as well when it comes to NVS design and implementation. But there's also quite some guidance out there. I know guidance does not mean that it can be put into practice immediately just because of a guidance, but might be helpful to look at what other cities have done.
Thank you, Bettina. Anna, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, when Bettina mentioned guidances, I would like to mention our co-creation guidance developed by Politecnico di Milano, which is an extremely good material for this topic. And in Belgrade, we did establish a task force developed by the mayor's decision. So it gathered over 40 institutions, which was a really good basic point, entry point. But afterwards, it was much more informal and gathered much higher number of participants and institutions as well. So yes, I think formal governance in the beginning, especially in the traditional environment such as Belgrade, is good. But yeah, the approach must be much more flexible.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you to all of the speakers. We're approaching the end of our webinar. Before I hand over to Vasilis from ICLEI, I just wanted to thank you all for joining, for connecting, to all of the speakers. I've learned a lot. And on the spirit of co-creation, I just would like to invite everyone here, everyone representing cities, working with cities, and partners working with urban resilience as well, working with nature-based solutions, to join the Making Cities Resilient initiative. We will share with you all of the links and resources, and soon we will upload the video of this webinar into our website and share with all of you as well over email. To do a final word, I'd like to invite my friend Vasilis from ICLEI.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Elena. Thanks a lot to everyone for the inspiring presentations. First of all, we heard such good stories from Hamburg and Belgrade. We discussed that also, like before, we are facing definitely a planetary crisis, climate change, nature loss, pollution, a health crisis on top of that. And in this context, nature-based solutions can be a powerful ally to address societal and environmental challenges. Like they can be a powerful tool to facilitate and catalyze the engagement of stakeholders across sectors to join forces towards the implementation of an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework and move towards achieving the CBD 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Nature-based solutions also offer a pathway for synergies among multilateral environmental agreements, from biological diversity to climate change to disaster risk reduction, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, and for mainstreaming nature conservation into decision-making processes. 2021 has been definitely a critical year for nature and society, and the year 2022 and the major upcoming negotiations should make, let's say, a turning point towards a resilient world for future generations, making use of the power of nature-based solutions. I would like here to take the opportunity to congratulate UNDRR for a great start to the Making Cities Resilient 2030 that will last for a full decade of peer-to-peer learning and support to cities in building resilience locally. We have managed to establish also quite well the beginning of the initiative in the Europe and Central Asia region with just 1 year, also like working virtually mostly. So, but we definitely need to do more, to work a lot within the initiative and with the growing number of signatory cities on the campaign and initiative, on community building, on building the necessary networks for exchange between all sizes of cities and geographical areas, and through building strategic interfaces between different levels of governance, and with the necessary support, of course, on financing institutions and supporting partners. For Europe specifically, it is important to build on the EU institutions and programs like the EU adaptation strategy, the adaptation mission, or work with European banks such as the European Investment Bank, but also the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This also goes further to Eastern Europe and Central Asia, their work there, but also on topics strongly related to NVS, such as health, socioeconomics, water management, and more. And coming back to the presentations before from Bettina and Daniela, it's important to employ the NVS community and what is already out there to expand on the implemented platforms, research to build on the research and innovation projects, to connect, to discuss, and to accelerate our activities and options for upscaling. So from my side, thanks a lot to all the participants on behalf of ICLEI and the Making Cities Resilient 2030. Goodbye. Have a good evening. Back to you, Helena.
No, thank you. Thank you, Vasilis, and thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.